Rommel's father was a teacher, as his grandfather had been, and his mother was the daughter of a senior official. A career as an army officer began to be fashionable, even among middle-class southern Germans, after the establishment of the German Empire in 1871. German Empire, historical empire founded on January 18, 1871, in the wake of 3 short, successful wars by the North German state of Prussia. Within a 7-year span, Denmark, the Habsburg monarchy, and France had been vanquished. The empire had its origin not in an upwelling of nationalist feeling from the masses but through traditional cabinet diplomacy and agreement by the leaders of the states in the North German Confederation, led by Prussia, with the hereditary rulers of Bavaria, Baden, Hesse-Darmstadt, and Württemberg. Prussia, occupying more than 3/5 of the area of Germany and having approximately 3/5 of the population, remained the dominant force in the empire until its demise at the end of World War I. Thus, notwithstanding the absence of a military tradition in his family, Rommel in 1910 joined the 124th Württemberg Infantry Regiment as an officer cadet. In World War I, Rommel fought as a lieutenant in France, Romania, and Italy. His deep understanding of his men, his unusual courage, and his natural gift of leadership quite early showed promise of a great career. In the Prussian-German army, a career on the general staff was the normal avenue for advancement, yet Rommel declined to take that road. Both in the Reichswehr of the Weimar Republic and in Adolf Hitler's Wehrmacht, he remained in the infantry as a frontline officer. Like many great generals, he possessed a pronounced talent for teaching and was accordingly appointed to posts at various military academies. The fruit of his battle experiences in World War I, combined with his ideas on training young soldiers and military thinking, formed the main components of his military textbook, Infanterie Graften. 1937, Infantry Attacks, which received high initial esteem. In 1938, after Austria's annexation by Germany, Colonel Rommel was appointed commandant of the officers' school in Wiener Neustadt, near Vienna. At the beginning of World War II, he was appointed commander of the troops guarding the Führer's headquarters and became personally known to Hitler. Rommel's chance to prove himself as a commander came in February 1940 when he assumed command of the 7th Panzer Division. He had never commanded armored units before, yet he quickly grasped the tremendous possibilities of mechanized and armored troops in an offensive role. His raid on France's Channel coast in May 1940 provided the first proof of his boldness and initiative. In 1938, after Austria's annexation by Germany, Colonel Rommel was appointed commandant of the officers' school in Wiener Neustadt, near Vienna. Why Rommel chose Wiener Neustadt? Because Wiener Neustadt, city, northeastern Austria. It lies near the Leitha River south of Vienna. Founded in 1194 by the Babenberg Duke Leopold V, it was chartered in 1277 and had a mint at that time. It was most prosperous in the 15th century, when it was the residence of the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick III, but it declined to such an extent in the 17th century that emigration was forbidden by imperial decree. The Rekturm, one of 3 towers surviving from the city's 13th century fortifications, has become a museum. Notable buildings include the much-restored 13th-century cathedral, Liebfrauenkirche, the former Jesuit college, 1737–43, now the Town Museum, the 13th-century castle where the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I, 1459–1519, was born and is entombed, and the Neukloster with the former Dominican church, 13th century. The castle serves as the Dresden Military Academy, founded 1752. The considerable bomb damage that Wiener Neustadt suffered in World War II led to much new construction, especially in housing. At the beginning of World War II, he was appointed commander of the troops guarding the Führer's headquarters and became personally known to Hitler. Rommel's chance to prove himself as a commander came in February 1940 when he assumed command of the 7th Panzer Division. He had never commanded armored units before, yet he quickly grasped the tremendous possibilities of mechanized and armored troops in an offensive role. His raid on France's Channel coast in May 1940 provided the first proof of his boldness and initiative. Less than a year later, in February 1941, Rommel was appointed commander of the German troops dispatched to aid the all but defeated Italian army in Libya. The deserts of North Africa became the scene of his greatest successes, and of his defeat at the hands of a vastly superior enemy. In the North African theater of war, the Desert Fox, as he came to be called by both friend and foe because of his audacious surprise attacks, acquired a formidable reputation, and soon Hitler, impressed by such successes, promoted him to Field Marshal. Rommel had difficulty following up these successes, however. North Africa was, in Hitler's view, only a sideshow. Nonetheless, despite the increasing difficulties of supply and Rommel's request to withdraw his exhausted troops, in the summer of 1942 Hitler ordered an attack on Cairo and the Suez Canal. Rommel and his German-Italian army were stopped by the British at Al-Alamein, Egypt, 60 miles, 100 kilometers, from Alexandria. At that time Rommel won astounding popularity in the Arab world, where he was regarded as a liberator from British rule. At home the propaganda ministry portrayed him as the invincible People's Marshal, Volksmarschall. But the offensive against Egypt had overtaxed his resources. At the end of October 1942, he was defeated in the Second Battle of El Alamein and had to withdraw to the German bridgehead in Tunis. In March 1943 Hitler ordered him home. In 1944 Rommel was entrusted with the defense of France's Channel coast against a possible Allied invasion. The master of the War of Movement then developed an unusual inventiveness in the erection of coastal defense works. From his experience in North Africa with Allied air interdiction, Rommel believed the only successful defense of the beaches lay in preventing the enemy a bridgehead by all possible means. To do so, he boldly advocated the placement of reserve forces immediately behind coastal defense works for counterattacks. His superiors, most notably Gerd von Rundstedt, demurred, however, insisting on a more traditional placement of reserves farther behind the lines to maximize the force's potential range of movement after the place of invasion became known. This disagreement, and the dissonance it fostered within organizations charged with repelling the Allies, weakened the effectiveness of the German defense when the invasion finally came along the Normandy coast. At some point in 1944, Rommel grew doubtful of Germany's ultimate prospects in the war and Hitler's capacity to face reality and make peace with the Western powers. In the spring of 1944, some of Rommel's friends who had joined the clandestine opposition to Hitler approached Rommel and suggested to him that it was his duty to take over as head of state after Hitler had been overthrown. Rommel did not reject the suggestion, but the men who wanted to extricate Germany from the war never revealed to Rommel that they planned to assassinate Hitler. They knew that Rommel did not accept the idea of murder for political ends. He had invariably disregarded any execution orders given to him by Hitler. When the invasion began, Rommel tried on several occasions to point out to Hitler that the war was lost and that he should come to terms with the Western powers. On July 17, 1944, at the height of the invasion battle, Rommel's car was attacked by British fighter bombers and forced off the road. It somersaulted, and Rommel was hospitalized with serious head injuries. In August he had recovered sufficiently to be able to return to his home to convalesce. In the meantime, after the failure of the attempt on Hitler's life on July 20, 1944, see July plot, Rommel's contacts with the conspirators had come to light. Hitler did not want the People's Marshal to appear before the court as his enemy and thence be taken to the gallows. He sent 2 generals to Rommel to offer him poison with the assurance that his name and that of his family would remain unsullied if he avoided a trial. On October 14 Rommel took poison, thus ending his life. He was later buried with full military honors. Let's know what is July plot. July plot, abortive attempt on July 20, 1944, by German military leaders to assassinate Adolf Hitler, seize control of the government, and seek more favorable peace terms from the Allies. During 1943 and early 1944, opposition to Hitler in high army circles increased as Germany's military situation deteriorated. Plans for the coup, codenamed Valkyrie, were set late in 1943, but Hitler, increasingly suspicious, became more difficult to access and often abruptly changed his schedule, thus thwarting a number of earlier attempts on his life. The leaders of the plot included retired Colonel General Ludwig Beck, formerly Chief of the General Staff, Major General Henning von Treschow, Colonel General Friedrich Albrecht, and several other top officers. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, one of Germany's most prestigious commanders, agreed with the conspirators that Hitler should be removed from power, but he looked on assassination with distaste and took no active part in the assassination attempt. The most stalwart conspirator was Lieutenant Colonel Claus, Count Schenk von Stauffenberg. On July 20, Stauffenberg left a bomb in a briefcase in a conference room at the Wolfschanz, Wolf's Lair, field headquarters at Rassenburg, East Prussia, where Hitler was meeting with top military aides. Stauffenberg slipped from the room, witnessed the explosion at 12:42 p.m., and convinced that Hitler had been killed, flew to Berlin to join the other plotters, who were to have seized the Supreme Command headquarters there. Bad luck and indecisiveness thwarted the plans. An attending officer had nudged the briefcase containing the bomb out of his way to the far side of the massive oak support of the conference table, which thus shielded Hitler from the full force of the explosion. A stenographer and 3 officers died, but Hitler escaped with only minor injury. Meanwhile, the other conspirators, unsure whether Hitler was dead, failed to act until Stauffenberg landed near Berlin more than 3 hours later. By then it was too late. Rumors of Hitler's survival melted the resolve of many of the key officers. In a countercoup at the Berlin headquarters, General Friedrich Fromm, who had known about and condoned the plot, sought to prove his allegiance by arresting a few of the chief conspirators, who were promptly shot, Stauffenberg, Albrecht, and 2 aides, or forced to commit suicide. Beck. In subsequent days, Hitler's police rounded up the remaining conspirators, many of whom were tortured by the Gestapo to reveal their confederates and hauled before the Volksgericht, People's Court, to be excoriated by the dreaded Nazi judge Roland Freisler. About 180 to 200 plotters were shot or hanged or, in some cases, viciously strangled with piano wire or hung up on great meat hooks. Even Fromm was eventually arrested, tried, and executed.